Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history. June 4th is one of those dates where history kicks the door open, points at the ceiling, and says, that crack has been spreading. Today we have bad omens, holy violence, protected cheese, burning castles, flying balloons, battlefield branding, speeches, ambushes, and two countries choosing opposite futures. Segment 1 and The Sky Files, a complaint. On June 4th, 781 BC, the Western Zhou dynasty got the ancient version of a push notification from the universe when a total solar eclipse blacked out the capital. In that world, the sun did not disappear because orbital mechanics were doing their job. It disappeared because heaven was apparently leaving a one-star review for King Yu of Zhou. The court was corrupt, good ministers were ignored, and one official was accused of building himself a comfort nest while the state rotted. The Book of Odes treated the eclipse like a cosmic audit, a warning that government was broken and the mandate of heaven was checking out early. Then there is King Yu's legendary romantic comedy of state collapse. He wanted to make his concubine Bao Si smile, so he repeatedly lit the emergency beacon fires, tricking vassal lords into thinking nomads were attacking. Nothing says stable monarchy like using the national defense system as a prank candle. When the real attack came years later, nobody answered. The dynasty fell, and the king died because his emergency alert system had become dinner theater. Jump ahead to June 4th, 1783, and humans looked up again, this time in Annonay, France, where Joseph Michel and Jacques-Étienne Montgolfier launched a giant hot air balloon. They misunderstood the science, thinking smoke held a mysterious lifting force. But they were wrong in exactly the productive way science occasionally rewards. The balloon rose, Europe gasped, and gravity suddenly looked less like a law and more like a suggestion with weak enforcement. One June 4th showed the sky terrifying a kingdom. Another showed humans answering back. Segment 2 and When Hate Gets a Megaphone. On June 4th, 1391, violence began in Seville that would help end the long, complicated era of Jewish life in medieval Christian Spain. The pressure had been building for years. Jewish communities were visible in finance, royal administration, and taxation, which meant they were close enough to power to be resented and vulnerable enough to be scapegoated. Enter Archdeacon Ferran Martinez, a preacher who spent years turning paranoia into public policy, with the confidence of a man who had never met a consequence he could not blame on someone else. He urged crowds to destroy synagogues, force baptisms, and isolate Jewish neighborhoods, while authorities told him to stop, and he basically responded, "Cute memo." After King John I of Castile died, the weak regency could not hold the line. Riots became massacre. Thousands were killed in Seville, and the violence spread across Spain. Many Jews converted under threat of death, creating the converso population, people legally Christian but often suspected of secretly remaining Jewish. That suspicion became a national obsession, the kind of paranoia that helped produce the Spanish Inquisition. The bitter irony is that forced conversion removed some legal restrictions, allowing conversos to rise in society, which then fed new resentment. So the mob got what it demanded, then became furious about the result, proving that bigotry is less a belief system than a subscription service with no cancel button. History does not need monsters with horns. Sometimes it just needs a demagogue, a frightened public, and officials who assume the fire will politely burn itself out. Segment 3 and Branding, Blood, and Blue Cheese. On June 4th, 1411, King Charles VI of France gave the village of Roquefort-sur-Soulzon exclusive rights to age and sell Roquefort cheese, making this one of the earliest protected regional food names in Europe. Charles was known as Charles the Mad, which makes it alarming that one of his most rational acts involved moldy sheep cheese. But credit where due. Local shepherds had been aging cheese in the caves of Combelou for centuries, using a natural microclimate that produced the sharp blue veins of Penicillium roqueforti. Then counterfeiters started selling knockoff Roquefort, because even in the Middle Ages, somebody was running a fake luxury brand out of a damp basement. The king's decree protected the name, the caves, and the local economy, laying the groundwork for later appellation systems. It is basically the medieval origin story of please stop calling gas station crumble authentic cave cheese. Fast forward to June 4th, 1859, and branding takes a darker turn at the Battle of Magenta. Franco-Piedmontese forces defeated Austria near Milan, breaking Austrian dominance in Lombardy and opening the road toward Italian unification. Soon after, a new synthetic red-purple dye was named magenta in honor of the victory. One of the colors in your printer is basically a commemorative battlefield souvenir. Roquefort shows history protecting place. Magenta shows history monetizing bloodshed. Together, they remind us that civilization is just humans saying, this cheese is legally special, and this color is available in cartridges. Somewhere between the cave and the battlefield, modern branding was born, wearing a tiny crown and asking if tragedy comes in a more marketable shade. Segment 4, and the spectacle misjudges the machine. On June 4th, 1615, Osaka Castle fell, ending the Toyotomi clan and sealing Tokugawa control over Japan. Tokugawa Ieyasu had already won the big political argument, but young Toyotomi Hideyori remained inside a fortress of unfinished business. Ieyasu used a temple bell inscription as a pretext for war, which is the 17th century version of starting a constitutional crisis over font choice. During the winter siege, he could not break the castle, so he negotiated peace and then had the protective moats filled in. It was diplomacy with a shovel. When fighting resumed, the castle was vulnerable. The defenders were doomed, and the burning fortress became the final punctuation mark on Japan's age of civil war. Hideyori and his mother died inside the collapsing world of their family, while Hideyori's wife, Senhime, granddaughter of Ieyasu, was rescued from the inferno, because history loves making Thanksgiving impossible. But June 4th also gives us another spectacle colliding with forces bigger than intention. In 1913, suffragette Emily Wilding Davison stepped onto the Epsom Derby track in front of King George V's horse, Anmer. She had endured prison, force-feeding, and state cruelty for the women's vote. Evidence in her pockets, including a return ticket and future plans, suggests she likely intended a dramatic protest, not suicide. But politics met physics at 35 miles per hour. Her death made her a martyr and forced suffrage onto front pages around the world. Osaka showed a regime removing the last rival. Epsom showed a movement forcing power to look directly at what it wanted ignored. In both, the machine kept moving, and history asked who got crushed beneath it. Segment 5, and defiance, decryption, and the fork in the road. On June 4th, 1940, Winston Churchill stood before Parliament after Dunkirk and had to perform the most difficult trick in politics, describing a catastrophe without letting catastrophe win. Britain had rescued hundreds of thousands of troops, but left behind tanks, vehicles, ammunition, and comfortable illusions. Churchill's Beaches speech did not sell victory as easy. It sold resistance as mandatory. It was the verbal equivalent of looking at an empty toolbox and saying, "Good news, we still have the house." 2 years later, June 4th delivered Midway. American code breakers under Joseph Rochefort had cracked enough Japanese naval traffic to confirm that target AF was Midway, thanks to a fake water shortage message that tricked Japan into identifying the target. Admiral Chester Nimitz positioned his carriers and waited. When American dive bombers found the Japanese fleet, the enemy decks were in chaos, with aircraft being rearmed, fuel exposed, and decisions aging badly in real time. In minutes, Japan lost the core of its carrier power, proving that sometimes the fate of empires turns on math, timing, and someone leaving explosives where the universe can see them. Then, June 4th, 1989, gave the world a split screen. In Poland, Solidarity crushed the communist regime in partially free elections, winning nearly everything it was allowed to contest and helping open the democratic wave across Eastern Europe. In Beijing, students demanding reform in Tiananmen Square faced tanks and gunfire, as the Chinese Communist Party chose force over negotiation. Poland's rulers blinked. China's rulers fired. Same date, same pressure, opposite futures. One government discovered it could not survive the ballot box. The other decided to keep the ballot box away from the public and call that stability. In conclusion, June 4th is a reminder that history rarely moves in a straight line. Sometimes it moves like a shadow across the sun, a mob through a city, cheese through a cave, a balloon into the sky, a dive bomber through the clouds, or a tank through a square. The pattern is not that people always learn. The pattern is that power always gets warned first. The tragedy is how often it mistakes the warning for background noise.